much like basically everybody else back in 2023, I got into Baldur's Gate. I had been eyeing the video game for a while, and then TikTok was showing me like weird thirst edits and like cool adventure edits, and I was like, I want to play the game. I honestly want to play the game. So I started playing the game, and I fell in love with its characters and its story, the music, the environment, but one character in particular stood out to me. Karlach Cliffgate, who is a loud and foul-mouthed soldier who has escaped from the Hells and is traveling with you in Faerun to find a cure for your little mind flayer parasite. Ever since I saw her in 2023 and really got to engage with her character in game, I was like, yep, okay, she's like my new favorite character and I really love her and I really want to cosplay her, but I'm scared of leather and her armor is all leather, so I'm not gonna make that armor. So for about a year, I kind of sat in turmoil over, well, I want to make the character, but I don't really like working with leather. And I was really struggling and I was thinking over what I could make. Was there a different armor set? Could I do this? Could I do that? And then, like an answer to my prayers, Hannah Alexander dropped her designs of Karlach in this regal, beautiful dress. She had multiple of them and they were all so different and beautiful with corsets and bracers and fun shoes, and I fell in love. I'm a sewist at heart. I love sewing, so a design that was primarily based around pretty fabrics, you could count me in. Now, I started sourcing fabric for this project back in September of 2024, which was roughly when Hannah Alexander released her design. And today, it is May 2025, and I am finally getting started on the first element of Karlach, her wig. Now, I am not a wigsmith. Let this be known. I have done a few cool wigs that people like, but at my core, I am a sewist. I do sewing, that is my like niche. I do the embroidery and the beadwork and the fun stuff. I don't consider myself good at wigs, and this one seems to be quite the undertaking. However, I think I can be relatively successful in replicating it after watching a million tutorials and talking to my friends who are wigsmiths. So, if you're curious and want to make your own Karlach Cliffgate wig, you can watch me suffer first to know what you should and shouldn't do. Let's get into it. Hello, it is time to style wigs, which is something I notoriously feel like I'm not good at, even though people tell me I am. So, we have two wigs for Karlach. We have a red one and a black one. And today we're going to be focusing on the red one because it's short and manageable, and I'm scared of the black one. We're also going to be not focusing on the fact that I look like Adam Sandler today. And yeah, despite all that yapping, I still didn't tell you what I was going to do. But basically, we're going to crimp and brush our wig. When you crimp and brush a wig, it gives it a lot more volume and a lot more structure. It also kind of helps to make the wefts a little more malleable. It makes them easier to spike. And with how much volume Karlach has in her hair, I needed these to have as much volume and structure as possible. I wouldn't recommend skipping this step. If you don't have a crimper, you can always just use a flat iron. But when you are working with wigs, especially highly stylized wigs like Karlach's might be, you want things to be easy to style. And by crimping and brushing, you're getting out knots, you're heating the fibers, and you're making them easier to style when you eventually get to that part of the process. Not only does it just make your wefts lighter, but it makes them thicker. And after crimping and brushing for a few hours, I had finally crimped and brushed both wigs, and I was ready to make wefts. It's weft making day, guys. So, we have the red wig here. It's been all brushed. It's been all nice. I also have tin foil to put the wefts on, a silicone brush, a hairbrush, turbo tacky glue because I want something non-toxic, and a pair of scissors. To cut the wefts. I also have Baldur's Gate loading up because I need more reference images of Karlach. I have a few screenshots from an origin run I'm doing, but I need a little bit more because the Hannah Alexander artwork is not very detailed. So let's dive into that. After giving Monet a pet and plastering a look of disgust on my face, I began snipping away at the wig. What I'm doing here is essentially cutting small strands of hair and then gluing just the tips of them together with Alina's Turbo Tacky Glue. It was a lot of work, but thankfully Monet was there to give me at least a little bit of emotional support. She kind of just watched me the whole time, but that was enough for me. You want to take relatively thin strands and douse just the tips in this tacky glue because it holds all the fibers of the weft together and creates a whole new strand of hair. The red wig was a little bit easier because I only needed about 2 or 3 dozen of these strands. Karlach doesn't have a ton of really prominent red in her hair, but then I had to move on to the black wig. The black wig was tricky because the type of wig I was making was called a helmet wig, which means I have to take the internal hairnet of this wig and essentially turn it into a helmet. So all of the hair needed to come off of this one, unlike the red wig. And I don't know if you've noticed, but this black wig is much thicker and much longer than the red wig, so this took a lot of time. By the time I was done, I was several hours deep, and I think I had like 10 to 12 different tinfoil trays of wefts on them. I would highly recommend waiting at least 24 hours just to make sure all your glue is set, but another thing I would recommend is not gluing directly on the tinfoil like I did. So you can see I learned my lesson here and I was using my fingers because my wefts, if I applied the glue directly on top of the tinfoil, would get, you guessed it, stuck to the tinfoil. Most of the time, I could just peel it off, but I did have to throw away a few wefts because they were just glued to the tinfoil. I would recommend using parchment paper or just smoothing the glue in with your hands and then lightly laying it over the tinfoil. But eventually, I had fully scalped the black wig, so it was time to create the helmet. Now, what warrants creating a helmet wig over just styling a wig normally? Well, helmet wigs typically have a lot more structure to them. Any wig that is going to have a lot of structure, might be top heavy, might be heavy on the side like Karlach's, probably warrants a helmet wig. This internal structure was just going to prioritize my comfort, but also just make sure the wig didn't flex or move in any way that would ruin the styling. How you do this is pretty easy. After scalping a wig, you take the remaining hair and the hairnet underneath and cover it in glue. I took 3 layers of turbo tacky glue over top of this wig and let it harden overnight. After everything was dry, I went in with floral wire, which you can see glued onto the top of my wig, and I put it in strands, 3 down and 1 right across the center of my head. And this created an unmoving helmet. This is exactly the type of structure I need, but it's just a start. I did need to go in and actually do a little bit more to make sure that Karlach's wig was really going to hold up. So just as a backup to make sure this wig could really withstand anything, I went in and I covered the whole thing in felt. This was going to help the fibers of the wefts grip to the wig better, but it was also going to help with some extra padding for me. I did this literally with just hot glue and Walmart felt. It is nothing fancy. I would glue the felt down, smooth it as much as possible, and then cut around the natural shape of the wig that I had created. If you're following along with this, you will just need to pay attention to where you want the hairline to fall, where you want the shaved part to fall, things like that, because your design might be slightly different than mine. You're also going to need a hole for your ears, so make sure you're not covering your ears up when you're going in with this felt coat. Another thing I would recommend is if you're like me and your head is slightly smaller and wigs just tend to kind of like fall off of you, go ahead and add some felt padding to the internal structure. The way I did this was that I just took that hot glue gun and I took the front band and the back band of the wig and glued a little extra felt padding in there just so that it wouldn't slip around on my head. But finally, after all that was done, we had a semblance of a helmet. Well, we have a helmet. So this thing is pretty tight, which is good. It's not tight, it's snug, which is good. And I'm definitely gonna need that because of the weight on it, because if it's not snug, it's just gonna whoop. But what I have learned from this whole experience is I have a small head, and my husband always kind of like jokes about it when he gives me one of his hats. It just like falls over my eyes. But this wig cap, even after it was like glued into place, was still too big. So if I take this off, you can see there's actually like a bunch of excess padding up here. There's some in the back, and then there's some like down by the nape of the neck because it is just, I just have a small head. And then it literally just comes on like this, helmet. So now I am going to trim up some things, and then we're gonna do some prep, and then we'll be adding wefts soon enough. And sure enough, weft day did come, and it was time to put all of the wefts on the wig. So here is how I did it. The first thing I did was that you'll see that there is a red side, and the red side was Karlach's shaved side. I made it a different color for 2 reasons. 1, because in-game you can slightly see her skin underneath this shaved side, and 2, I did not want to put it on the wrong side by making the whole thing out of black felt. So I specifically marked this side out in red. Next, I took some of the wefts that I had made that had fully dried, and I began placing them along the hairline with just a drop of hot glue. Wigs and hot glue are not a great combination because hot glue is stringy and wefts are fragile, and overall it can just be a big mess, so use as little as possible. If you just put your hairline on the border and you don't push it down towards you, it will just float and you'll be able to see the helmet. So make sure that you are pushing down towards your skin just a little bit to close that gap. Then what I did was I put a little bit of the turbo tacky glue on the felt, and then on top of that smoothed it over the entire weft like I'm doing here. And this was just to help make sure everything stayed in place. I did not want anything to shift, particularly on the shaved side. When it came to finishing this off, I ended up just cutting where that red ends and gluing everything down, again, with hot glue and turbo tacky glue. I did not film all of the shaved side because my phone was running out of storage, but you're just going to want to follow that natural hairline down, and you'll end up with something similar to this. And now that your shaved side is done, you can go ahead and move into the hairline. In my opinion, a glued hairline is one of the hardest things to do on a wig, and it is even harder to make it look good. What I did was I would take my wefts and I would kind of cut an angled shape into the end. You can kind of figure out what shape you like best, but then I would play with it. I would put it all over the wig before finding out the spot I wanted to put it in, and then again, just taking a very small drop of hot glue and gluing it into place along the hairline. If you're still a little lost on how to achieve this, you can kind of see what I did here. You can see that each individual strand is a little bit staggered. Your hairline naturally is not stuck into a specific shape. It's not straight, it is very much jagged and follows a natural progression of your hairline. So if you want your hairline to look a little more natural, go for more angled shapes. And if you need inspiration, go ahead and look at your hairline or literally Google pictures of Karlach's hair. I found at least that this helped me a lot with getting the shape that I wanted and that looked at least somewhat natural. But once you have that entire front hairline done, what I recommend doing is going in and starting on her side part. Now, how I did this is that I left the top weft on the shaved side slightly loose so that I could basically poke the new wefts underneath it and create a hairline that was relatively seamless. Now, I couldn't do this in the back because as you can see here, I had cut the back and it was a little bit wonky, but it created the shaved side effect. So what I did instead was I utilized that fake hairline we talked about earlier and glued the wefts over top of that wonky line. This is very time consuming, but I think the end product was absolutely worth it. Karlach has a lot of hair, so it's going to take time and layering and just a precision to get the wig looking the way you want specifically. As you continually layer the wefts, you're going to get multiple different layers of hair. Here you can see my construction layer, which acted not only for this fake hairline on the side, but laid down hair to cover the remaining felt on the wig. On top was a few different cosmetic layers that I had glued in. I demonstrated a bit better here, but you can see as I peel back these top wefts, you can't see where the wefts underneath start or end. There are no big globs of glue or big chunks of weft, basically. Even as I pull back a big chunk here, you'll notice you can't see where the wefts underneath are glued, which is ideal. However, if you do have a rogue weft, like right here, that might be shown, make sure to cover it up with your pretty cosmetic layer. But once you have got everything glued down, you've got all your layers figured out, you're going to go ahead and start kind of blocking out where you want your spikes to lay if you plan on spiking your wig. Here I am essentially blocking out big chunks that I want to use for spikes, which I will go in and then thin at the ends later. But for now, it's really only important that you get the general block of hair. Now that everything is blocked, everything is glued, everything is ready, it is time to start styling. You can see here that I did hold back a chunk of the hair just for her braids and that little bit of sparse hair that she has coming down over her shoulder. After that was all sectioned out, I went ahead and just started thinning every single weft using my scissors. If you just cut your hair blunt, you're not going to be able to get a spike. So you go ahead and you thin it by running the scissors up and down the weft, and you're able to get a more precise spike. I utilized Got to Be Glued because it is basically a spray glue, and then it is set by using heat. So I went ahead and used a hairdryer to really get the shape I wanted, which is why I'm wearing a respirator. Hairspray in small doses is not going to kill you. Like if you're getting ready in the morning, that's cool. But if you're using it like I was for 4 or 5 hours at a time, wear a respirator, open windows, and make sure the area you're working in is well ventilated because that can build up in your lungs. I specifically had dust mask filters in my respirator, so just using a dust mask will also probably be good enough. But then it is up to you to style your spikes however you like. You can see that I kind of have a tendency to curl my spikes out a little bit more. I went ahead and layered them. I made sure you could kind of see all the spikes even when I was standing in front. I put a lot of time into this, so I wanted you to be able to see basically as much as possible. Another thing to be conscious of if you're spiking is just to make sure that everything is covered, you don't have any bald spots, and when styling her bangs, just remember that you are going to have horns on your head, so make sure to make holes specifically on your left side for that horn to come through. I actually butchered it here, but I ended up going back and restyling it off screen. Don't feel stupid if styling takes you a long time because it took me a long time. You can literally see right here how the light outside changes. I would restyle spikes 2 or 3 times before I got a shape I wanted, but then finally I was happy with the side and I was able to move on to her braided side. I went ahead and sectioned out my braids before going in and thinning out the rest of the strands of hair. In game, she's got these loose kind of waves that hang over her shoulders. So I just went ahead, heated up my hair with my flat iron, and then basically held it into a curl shape before hairspraying it and kind of running my hands through it. This resulted in a fun, messy shape, but I also think it changed up the texture from the big straight spikes on the side. Again, this was just a personal preference. If you don't like it, just, don't do it. After the bulk of the wig was styled, I went in and got rid of the glue marks. Hey, remember when I said we were going to talk about that? Here we are. If you do end up having some excess glue, you can just take a Sharpie or an alcohol-based marker and literally just color over those glue globs. Obviously, if it's a huge wad, pick it out. I had to go through my wig and do that a few times, but if it is just a small little thing you're not really worried about getting out, go ahead and just run over a marker with it. Nobody is going to be able to tell. I would also recommend just securing your shaved side one last time. I went ahead and sprayed some hairspray on it, ran over it with my finger to get any stray hairs off, and then heated it up with a hairdryer, and that really helped cement everything into place. So now we get to move on to the actual final step, which is just take some heat to it. I took my steamer. This helped me to bind the wefts together, solidify the shape, just make sure everything was held in place with even more heat. I did little spritzes of hairspray where I thought possible. If I needed to brush out glue somewhere, I did it. This was just basically the end, the touch-up. I'd been working on this wig 20 hours at this point, and I was ready for it to be done. But finally, it was. So, Karlach is done. Look at her, look at her. I was so terrified to start this project, and genuinely, in all honesty. I'd never made a helmet wig, and I don't consider myself a wigsmith or somebody who's really, really good with wigs. I've made a few cool ones, but nothing like this. And in all honesty, I love the result. If you don't, and this is not the kind of look that you want for your wig, that is completely fine. But I am obsessed with it, and that's all that matters, because whose cosplay is it? Mine. And when you're making your wig, as long as you're happy with it, that's really all that matters. So I will say, just a few takeaways from this process. I would probably do the shaved part last instead of doing it first, just because I kind of struggled with this weft line up here, and I wish I would have been able to hide it under the shave a little more. It still looks good. It's just, again, kind of ease and things I learn as I go along, because this is my first time making a helmet wig. Another thing is I think I would actually add a little more black into it, which seems kind of crazy because there is a lot of black in this wig, but I would like to add a little bit more. I would appreciate if this side was a little bit thicker, but I mean, I love how it looks. I'm not going to go back and change it or remake another one. These are just things that, you know, learning, things I wish I could have done differently. But other than that, I truly am obsessed with it. I am very excited to like get the horns and the bodysuit and everything else involved. But the reason I made this tutorial was because I don't see a lot of Karlach tutorials, and she's a pretty like popular character. I know a lot of people are like scared to cosplay her, like me. I'm scared to cosplay her. But if you don't put yourself out there and you don't try things, then you're never gonna know what you're capable of. So that's why I'm attempting this cosplay. And this isn't the only video that will be part of my Karlach series. I'm hoping to document the whole thing on YouTube. So if you enjoyed this, then you are really in for a treat the rest of the year. I do just want to give a quick disclaimer though before we end the video. This is not easy and it is not quick. I was able to bust this out in a week. And that was because it was a holiday week, so I had a few extra days off of work. It took me around 20 to 25 hours in a week. I originally budgeted out a month for this. And the fact that I got it done in a week is crazy to me because I don't think I've ever busted out a wig this quick, and especially one of this caliber. So I'm pretty proud of it, but I hope you enjoyed it. If you end up trying this, tag me on Instagram or comment or do something to get my attention. I would love to see how these results work for you. If they turned out good, if you go for a different look or a different approach, I would be like super ecstatic to see that. That would be really cool. But next time I will be diving into her bodysuit, her tail, scarring, all of that stuff. So if you want to see me suffer through that, you can go ahead and subscribe because hopefully that'll be out in like a few months, maybe. But I've got some other content coming out around other costumes and con trips and some other things that I'm excited for. So thank you again for watching, and I will see you again next time.